Okay, what you should see in front of you is two books, two very different books. This book is a work of nonfiction called Educated, which is a memoir about this woman, Tara Westover, and her family. And this book is a modern retelling of from the voice of a character from The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. This is a work of fiction. This is not a work of fiction. All right. I am going to show you how to annotate and how to read for meaning. Because sometimes your teachers will ask you to share your thoughts on something or ask you to annotate, and we often have no idea what they're talking about. Not an earthly clue. So I'm going to try to illuminate that a little bit today and make it seem a little bit less intimidating, because I'm going to ask you to do a piece of annotation and response this week. So we're going to start with educated. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go grab my tools. If this was on the computer, I could type on it, but I am going to be looking at the very first page. Actually, the very first page of chapter 1. All right. And I'm only going to be working with a passage. So from the top here all the way to the word happened. Okay. What I need is sticky notes, and I need something to write with. That's it. If this book belonged to you, you could highlight, you could underline. We cannot do that because this book is a library book, so I don't want to disrespect these pages. So hold on while I go grab that. All right, so what I have are my pen and my stack of sticky notes. It doesn't have to be large. Mine are pretty large if you compare it to my actual hand, but you really can use anything. All right. One thing that also works really well for this are book flags. There's these little tags that you can put next to different areas of the reading. Okay. So let's talk about annotation here for a second. All annotation is marking the text. That's it. For some people, it comes very naturally, and for others, it doesn't come naturally at all. And if it doesn't come naturally to you, that's perfectly fine. It doesn't always come the most naturally, even to someone like me. So when I'm annotating, I'm always determining a purpose, either one given to me by a teacher or my own purpose. So what we're going to do is we are going to annotate this text for a purpose, and our purpose is voice. Okay? So we would need to consider what makes up voice. Is voice how a character sounds? Is a voice how the characters around the main character sound? How would we describe a person's voice? Okay, we know this is a memoir, so it's going to be one singular voice, the voice of the narrator. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read this, and I'm going to stop at points where I see language that helps develop voice. Okay. Chapter 1, choose the good. My strongest memory is not a memory. It's something I imagined, then came to remember as if it had happened. The memory was formed when I was 5, just before I turned 6, from a story my father told in such detail that I and my brothers and sister had each conjured our own cinematic version with gunfire and shouts. Mine had crickets. That's the sound I hear as my family huddles in the kitchen, lights off, hiding from the feds who surrounded the house. A woman reaches for a glass of water, and her silhouette is lighted by the moon. A shot echoes like a lash of a whip, and she falls. In my memory, it's always mother who falls, and she has a baby in her arms. The baby doesn't make sense. I'm the youngest of my mother's 7 children. But like I said, none of this happened. All right. So when we are reading, we want to read for voice, but we also want to look at theme. Theme, this is the easiest way to describe it. Language plus theme equals meaning. So we're looking at what a writer is doing. So how is this writer using language to help develop an idea? All right. So for me, what is striking to me is this word memory. And if I had to think of what a theme might be right now, and a theme is an overarching kind of message, maybe it is memory fails us, or memory is unreliable. Okay? Now, how does she use, this is the author, Tara Westover, how does she use her voice to demonstrate that memory fails us? Okay, I look at that first line, my strongest memory is not a memory. So I am going to reference this quote. Okay, this opening line helps establish her feelings of like lack of being sure about her memory. All right. And how I see this happening, this voice, is through repetition. My strongest memory is not a memory. Okay. How can your memory not be a memory? That doesn't seem to make sense. It's something I imagined then came to remember as if it happened. Okay? The memory was formed when I was 5, just before I turned 6, from a story my father told in such detail that I and my brothers and sister had each conjured our own cinematic versions with gunfire and shouts. One thing I notice is, as part of her voice, the writer's voice, is, so I said repetition, but I'm also noticing stark, straightforward statements and comparisons. Let me demonstrate what I mean. That's the sound I hear as my family huddles in the kitchen, lights off, hiding from the feds who surrounded the house. This is very matter-of-fact language. Doesn't seem to be particularly emotional. A woman reaches for a glass of water, and her silhouette is lighted by the moon. Then we have that kind of figurative language that doesn't seems to be almost like an observation. A woman reaches for a glass of water and silhouette lighted by the room. A shot echoes like a lash of a whip, and she falls. So it goes from being very matter of fact to starting to be more figurative. The shot echoes like a lash of a whip, and she falls. It could have just been she got shot and she fell. But that image, that simile of how she fell, is important to understanding this person. In my memory, it's always mother who falls, and she has a baby in her arms. Another of very matter-of-fact language. So when I say straightforward statements and comparisons, these are what I would call juxtaposed. It's called juxtaposition. Juxtaposition means putting two things side by side to show contrast. All right. This, you often see this, writers will write a really, really long sentence and then follow it up with a really short sentence. That's juxtaposition. It is a form of contrast, right? So just in that one paragraph, I was able to identify what I thought the theme might be and also identify some of the strategies, the writer's strategies that the writer uses to develop her voice. Okay? So let's compare this to the nonfiction, or to the fiction, excuse me, here in a second. So how do I go about doing this? Step by step. I'm going to read my passage completely. Then I'm going to ask myself what I'm looking for. What is it that what's my goal for this close reading? In this close reading, it was voice. All right. I'm going to identify a thematic idea that seems to be at play in the passage. And I'm going to pick 1 to 3 kind of strategies or devices you see the writer using. Okay? You should be able to always look at the evidence that you found and connect it back to memory failing us. This is important because she's both remembering it, but also being told the memory. That is why some of her memories are very straightforward, and some parts of the memory are very kind of dramatic and literary, because what she remembers and what she is told tell two different stories. Memory fails us. Okay, so let's compare this to my gym. All right. So if I open to the very first page of my gym, I want you to notice how the voice of the speaker may be different. Okay. And I'm just going to read the whole first page here. He has Freeman ask me to marry him. Take me by the hand, take me in his arms, lift me on his horse and jump up right behind me. Show me a letter, say he got duty with the 9th Cavalry at Fort Robinson, Nebraska. Got to ride out there and chase down them savage whites and Indians. I'm real happy for Chaz. He's so proud. But I don't want to go to Nebraska, and I tells him so. Cloud come over his face and he get real quiet. You think on it, he say. Me, I can't share crops no more. I ain't born a slave, and I ain't gonna live like one. Okay, so we don't really know anything much about this particular character, but there are some things that we can sort of make assumptions about. So I am taking my sticky note, and I'm kind of assuming a couple of things. So I should be able to identify the topic that is being addressed right away, just by opening this first page. And for me, this seems to be very much about slavery. Okay? So I'm going to put thematic topic at the top here, and it's going to be about slavery. Okay? And then we know that our purpose is voice. Okay, so we have our theme, or at least our thematic topic, and we have our purpose. Okay, so now what do we notice? Well, for me, right away, something I noticed as being very different from the last passage was all the sentence structure is very short. It's almost, if you've ever heard of stream of consciousness, stream of consciousness means coming from your own head, because our thoughts are often jumbled. They are not like kind of like linear, complete sentences. So he has Freeman ask me to marry him. Who? This is the first page. We don't know anything. Take me by the hand. Take me in his arms. All right? By the speaker here saying, take me by the hand, take me in his arms, lift me on his horse, and jump up right behind me, Show me a letter says he got duty with the 9th Cavalry at Fort Robinson, Nebraska. There is a sense here that the events are happening to this person. And they're trying to kind of take it all in. We tend to have these kind of very short, clipped sentences when we're trying to take in information. Okay? That is ultimately why the speaker chooses their words this particular way. So the overarching kind of topic or purpose here, or not purpose, strategy we see is this short sentence structure. It's observational. These are things that are happening to this person, not necessarily choices that's being made. I real happy for Chaz. Do you think it's a typo here? I real happy should be I'm real happy? No, because it's getting at the voice of this real person. And this real person has either a simplified way of speaking or lives in a time period in which this would be an acceptable way for them to speak. He's so proud, but I don't wants to go to Nebraska, and I tells him so. Okay? So there seems to be some sort of conflict here. So I might write that down in my close reading too, conflict. Okay? You think on it, he say. This is something that somebody is saying, but there's no quotation marks. So I'm going to put lack of quotation marks. I ain't born a slave and I ain't going to live like one. All right. So based on what I just said, I see conflict, I see lack of quotation marks, and short sentence structure. Can this communicate anything to me about slavery? Sure, to a certain extent. When we look at what the speaker is going through, the short sentence structure and the lack of quotation marks help establish that this is all happening at one time. You know, there's almost a sense like this person doesn't have enough time really to react to the situation. It's happening very quickly. And there does seem to be some sort of conversation here about being a slave. And so that is ultimately why I chose slavery as kind of my thematic connection. The voice here, we know is different. Sometimes we can't necessarily explain it, but we know that the voice is different in this book than in this, all right? It's less modern and it's much more choppy, okay? And that would follow in to all the other pages, all right? So let's recap. When you're reading a work of fiction or narrative nonfiction, which is what this is, select a purpose, identify a possible theme, find 2 or 3 strategies that a writer is using. Connect these ideas to theme. Some of you are going to say that's like way too hard. Some of you are going to say like, oh, that seems way too easy. You're both right. It's not as challenging as it looks with practice, but when you haven't practiced it, it can feel kind of like you're doing magic. So when you do your annotation, I'm going to ask you to read, and I'm going to ask you to identify. So how many annotations would I be expecting you to do? That was really dependent on the individual. But if I said that for each section of an annotation, you should write 2 or 3 strategies, and I have a annotation that's 3 paragraphs long, then I should probably have 3 to 6 comments. Okay? As a general rule of thumb. Okay? Hopefully that helped get you started, and you can find your annotation assignment in the module section of the Canvas page.